This episode of The Edge is brought to you by Audible.com, offering more than 180,000 titles for smartphone, tablet, and desktop. To get a free audiobook of your choice and help Trek.fm at the same time, visit audibletrial.com/trekfm. And also by Enterprise in Space, an international program of the nonprofit National Space Society. Find out how you can help science and education and become a virtual crew member aboard the NSS Enterprise Orbiter by visiting enterpriseinspace.org. And if you want to join the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode, join the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field. We look forward to seeing you there.
You're listening to Trek FM.
What have you done out there on the edge of Federation space?
Welcome to The Edge, Trek FM's dedicated Star Trek Discovery podcast. I am your host today, Brandon-Shea Mutala, and joining me is Miss Amy Nelson. How are you doing, Amy?
I am great. Glad to be back on the main show again. It's been a while.
Yeah, who are you? Stranger danger. No, we're all friends here. We're all good. So, we've got some fun times for you tonight. We're about to record ourselves a wonderful interview with Hanelle Culpepper, and this is great because Hanelle is a director of one of the episodes of Star Trek Discovery from the second half of the season. She directed the episode Vaulting Ambition. So we're about to get into the recording with her. Before we get into the interview with her, I'm going to read a little bit from her webpage, and this is what her webpage says. Hanelle M. Culpepper is an energetic and unflappable award-winning television and film writer-director whose visual, story-driven films have played in festivals around the world and on television. In 2015, Hanelle was nominated for an Image Award for Outstanding Directing for a Drama Series. Hanelle's television directing credits include CBS's Stalker, Hawaii Five-0, and Criminal Minds, ABC's American Crime, Castle and Revenge, the CW's 90210, The Flash and the Originals, Fox's Sleepy Hollow, NBC's Grimm and Parenthood, and her Parenthood episode was chosen by the producers to represent the series for Emmy consideration. That's a pretty outstanding resume, eh, Amy?
Absolutely, and I've seen a lot of those shows, so excited to talk with her.
Yeah, you'll have to check out and see if you've watched the episodes that she's directed, but she's kind of all over the place. She's directing everything.
I know.
So that's very good. Yeah, it's very good for her because it's giving her a lot of experience in a lot of different genres of film and television. We're going to talk to her a little bit, but she's actually got a Vimeo page where you can go and watch a couple of her short films, which I did, and we're going to talk about some of those short films as well. They're pretty good. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think we're going to have a cool little interview with her. One of the really cool things about it, though, that we can't go without mentioning. So she won the award in 2004 for Outstanding Director Award at the Gaffers, Gaffers, and she won the 2005 award for Emerging Filmmaker Award at the Cine Noir Festival. And she is actually also the first African-American woman to direct for Star Trek. So that's a pretty amazing honor. I mean, it's amazing that it's taken that long, 52 years. Here we are into Star Trek, but she's able to hold that banner high. So we're very glad to welcome her to The Edge. And why don't we just jump into the interview with her right now? Thank you so much, Hanelle, for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to join us and talk a little bit about your career and your work on Star Trek.
Very excited and happy to be here.
Well, before we get into the main interview, we have to start with this question. It's kind of the question that we ask all of our guests. But what is your history with Star Trek? Did you watch it growing up, or is this something new to you?
Well, I did watch it growing up. I have to admit that I was a Star Wars fan for most of my life when it comes to that big debate. However, when they did episodes 1, 2, and 3 of Star Wars, I was very disappointed in those. And meanwhile, all the new Star Trek movies were really good. So I shifted over to becoming a Trekkie later in life, much to the chagrin of my good Star Wars friends. And I still prefer, to me, enjoying the Star Trek movies more than the Star Wars movies.
Very nice.
Well, that's funny because, we watched your short film, How to Wait in Line for Star Wars. This was an award-winning film. It won the award for Best Short Documentary at the West Valley Indie Fest. What was the genesis of this film?
Well, I was just kind of fascinated by the fact that people were lining up so early, and I went and just shot a bunch of footage the first episode, just intending to do a documentary about these people. And I didn't get it together in time with editing. And then the next episode came out, and so I went and shot more footage. And in the time that was happening, other people did feature documentaries about the people who had lined up for Star Wars. And so I tried to think, well, what could be a different take that I can do on this footage? And that's where I came up with doing it in the form of a 1950s educational film to teach you how to stand in line for Star Wars.
It's pretty funny, and I'll confess that I was one of the people that was waiting in line. This was back in '99. I was 18 years old, and I'm a huge Star Wars fan as well. And that was back in the day when movie theater tickets were only available for sale a week before the movie came out, and so we waited in line all night to buy tickets. I'm in Regina, Saskatchewan, so there wasn't as many people, but it was still an overnight fun experience that we had.
To tell you the truth, if I had more time, I probably would have done it too. It was fun hanging out with everybody, and it was just amazing, the whole system that they had worked out.
Yeah, it was an amazing system. I'd never heard of that before. I've never stood in line for a movie that long, so that was pretty amazing documentary.
Excellent. If the listeners would like to check out some of her work, some of her short films, you can find her on Vimeo, which is where I found it. And also on there is your first short film, which I watched, which I believe is called The Wedding Dress.
That's right.
Yeah, and it's a very cute film about this guy that wants to live the bachelor life. He's got a girlfriend that he doesn't want to commit to, and he accidentally finds a wedding dress in her closet. And he spends most of the film discussing with his beer bar friends about getting advice on what he should do. And one of the people that he talks with is like a guy that's never been married as well. And it's a pretty cute film, but it's really well done.
Thank you. That was inspired because I actually had a wedding dress hidden in my closet for a few years before my boyfriend and I ever got engaged. And so I just kept thinking, what would happen if he ever found this wedding dress? But my aunt and I had gone shopping one day. We just were in this store, and I was like, "Oh my God, this wedding dress is like my dream wedding dress." And she's like, "You should buy it." I'm like, "But I'm not even engaged." But you should buy it. And so that's how it came to be in my closet. I think probably 2 years before he asked me to marry him. And then, interesting enough, so I did get my wedding dress. That wasn't the main wedding dress. I ended up buying a completely different one for the wedding, but I changed into that one for the dancing part of the wedding. So it did finally make its appearance.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
And it's got a really cute ending. I definitely recommend the listeners check it out. It's a 17-minute short film. It's a cute film with a really cute ending. So yeah, definitely check it out. Awesome.
Now, I'm so impressed. You have been working since 2011 and all different genres. There's so many shows that I just love, and you've got sci-fi and drama and crime. Is it easier, or is there a type of genre that's more challenging to work with, or one that's easier?
I don't know if any of them are easier or more challenging. What's probably the most fun about it is, I'll do an action one, and then as soon as I'm like, oh, I'm so tired of all these action shots, then I'll go off and do a sci-fi, and that gets, then that fills in that side of me. And then, once I'm tired of all the visual effects and stuff you have to keep track of, I'll get to go do, a good old thriller. And then I'm sick of blood and stabbing and all this stuff. And then I get to go do a nice, actor-driven drama. And then as soon as you're sick of dealing with actors, and then you go back to the other one. So they all have their challenges, and the audience has come to expect very cinematic, very big shows, and the writer definitely writes them that way. But meanwhile, the amount of time we shoot them has remained the same. So they are all challenges right now.
When you direct an episode of a series for the first time, what type of research do you do to prepare yourself for the production?
So I try to watch, depending on what season it's in, I try to watch every episode that's ever been done, especially if it's, obviously if it's a procedural and it's in season 10 or something, there's no point in watching every episode. However, I do try to watch the premiere episode, the middle, and the finale of each season, and I read all the descriptions just so that I can come in there having a pretty solid idea of how the character stories have developed over the seasons. But if it's in less than that, if it's season, 2, 3, 4, or 5, I really try to watch everything. And then I also try to look into just looking up the key people involved, the actors, the showrunners, to see what else they've done. The DP I may be working with. If I see that they've crossed over with something else that I've done, I'll call those people to find out how they are to work with and kind of do my research that way. But the main way is to try to watch as many episodes as possible so that the style of that show just becomes ingrained in you, in the way the actors perform, that it just becomes part of your instincts when you're making these decisions, with little time.
So interesting when you say that. Obviously, Star Trek has 50 years going on that. But I was really curious, did Star Trek come and ask you to direct, or did you throw your hat in the ring? I'm not very familiar with how that whole process goes.
So Star Trek actually came to me, and I think it's because of their producing director. His name is Olatunde. And we had worked together, or not worked together, but we had both done episodes of another project. And he really loved my episode of that series. And so they asked me to come do it.
Well, how challenging was it to direct for a show that hadn't aired yet?
Yeah, when you come in on the first season of a series, it's definitely a little harder because you don't have anything to watch. So what I did, at least with Star Trek, the pilot had been done. So I'll watch the pilot. And I think actually, since I came in and did 12, some of the other episodes were available for me to watch as well. Sometimes when you come in on these first season shows, all you have is a pilot. And so what I also did, and I did this with Star Trek too, is I asked them, which movies do you feel best convey the tone of what the style and look you want of the show? And so I'll watch those movies. But also Star Trek gave you, they had put together a book of visuals and of some of the design of the sets and stuff that they gave you so that you could have that as well.
Oh, interesting. Well, that's good. So we have a lot of listeners who are very interested in film angles and stuff like that. So what type of cameras are used for Star Trek?
So we use the Alexas, which is actually what a lot of shows are using these days. And we use the Alexa Mini. And they carry cranes. And a lot of my stuff was actually shot using a techno dolly. So all those scenes with Anthony playing with himself, we shot with the techno dolly.
Now, so what the techno dolly, is that like a kind of like a, what's the term I'm looking for, where they do the repeated motion?
Right, exactly. It's a motion control dolly. And so what you will do is, so you'll figure out, you set it up and you do your first take. And once you get to a take that you're happy, it's locked in. And then Anthony goes and changes clothes and does the other character. And the techno dolly will repeat its motion exactly how it did it before. And so it is very handy, but it does not come without its issues. We had one day when we had, a big day, of course, and the techno dolly was supposed to be most of the shots. And this were the scenes with when he plays against himself in his engineering lab. And the techno dolly just kept not wanting to work, and they would figure out something, and then we would get ready to roll and call action, and then it would just shut down again. And finally it was like, I think we're gonna just have to figure out a different way to shoot this, because it was getting on to be an hour into our day waiting on this thing to decide to work. And then so we started shooting it other ways, and ultimately it worked. Finally, they figured out it was just like a little tiny technical thing that was some reason tripping it and making it confused. But then the sad thing is I looked and I saw that they didn't even use the opening in that scene, which was part of the whole reason we did the techno dolly of it all.
Right.
Oh. Because, I guess being a director on a TV show, you've got a limited amount of time that you've got to work on your part of the production. And if you've got something like that malfunctions, then you've got to kind of be a fireman as well. And you got to put out fires and figure out a new way to solve the problem. And if you had to design, I want to do it this way, it's not working, I got to come up with something else on the fly.
Right, exactly. And that's why as much as you can prep ahead of time so that when these fires happen, and they happen all the time, you're not completely just overwhelmed and thinking, what do I do? You have a plan B in mind that you can just kind of jump to.
So you were saying that, you had that opening shot and then they didn't use it. Like, how much input do you have in the editing process? Like, if you're like, oh, I really want this in, but then it ends up on the chopping floor.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing about TV directing that is a bummer for all TV directors. And it's the one reason I still want to do features, is that basically you get the editor does their assembly, and they turn in their assembly about 4 days after you finish shooting. And then you have 4 days to do your cut of the film. If there's time. I've been on some shows where it was going to air so quickly that my 4 days was reduced down to 2, and even 1 on one show. And that 1 day became half a day because we lost power for half a day. So I had half a day to do my director's cut. But so you get those 4 days, and you try to turn in. Some shows want you to turn in a cut that is to time. And some shows just want you to cut in the best version of the show, but keep it long so that they can cut it down. Sometimes I'll rearrange scenes or trim scenes if I feel like it helps with the rhythm and the pace and the overall telling of the story. But once you turn in your cut, then you really don't know at all what it's going to be until you see it on TV. And it's so different from features where you're involved all the way through post. And even if you don't have final cut, you know what's happening, you know how they're changing it through the whole process.
So how long was your cut of the episode? Because the final version was only 37 minutes, which, has been noted down as the shortest episode of Star Trek that we've had.
Yeah, I think my cut, I'd have to look that up. I feel like my cut was probably only 44 minutes. 46, something like that. I actually can find that out for you. If I'd known, I would have looked that up. So, but my episode had a lot of talking scenes that I had even trimmed down. Like the scene with Saru and Laurel talking in her cell had a lot more talking in it. And so I think ultimately what they found, even some scenes between Michelle Yeoh and Sonequa, there were just more talking. And I guess I trimmed out what I thought was not necessary, but kept the show moving. But, as what also happens when you work on first season of shows, they are constantly changing them around. Even the pilot in episode 1, and episode 2 were so different from how they were originally shot. So I think that they start to realize even more of what words we don't need. And so it felt like mostly a lot of words came out, and then the ending was significantly changed.
For yours or for the pilot episode?
For mine.
Do you know how that changed?
They did a completely different scene. It was that I had that he was in the agonizer, and the guard was
Lorca.
Lorca was in the agonizer, and the guard was torturing him, and then ultimately the guard gets killed at the end, and then Lorca goes and gives a speech and then frees his guys. And so they changed it, which I actually thought that the rewrite was quite impactful. They changed it so that he kills the guard and then says her name was Ava, and so that's your reveal. And then in the original way they had it, it was the reveal was more that when he walked into the room where all the agonizers were and announced he was back and had this speech.
Yeah, because it's an interesting episode, and like that was a big reveal with Stamets having come from the Mirror Universe, and Star Trek Discovery itself had two very major plot twists that kind of some of them seemed predicted at the beginning. Like, I don't know how aware you were when you were filming them that these secrets were meant to be hidden, or whether they were meant to be known. Like the fans predicted pretty early on that Voq was Tyler. And so I've often wondered, is that something that they laid out to be predictable, to try and hide the fact that Lorca was coming from the Mirror Universe? Or were both of them meant to be?
Yeah, I would say, all of that they try to keep super secret, like the whole Voq Tyler thing. I mean, even on our call sheets, they had different names so that it wouldn't be leaked that they were the same person. With Lorca, I think that they had like little hints for you so that the astute person could watch them and maybe pick up on that. Also, it just kind of makes it fun for when you go and watch those episodes again to see all the little hints that he was that person. And as well for the Mirror Stamets reveal. But I think, but you asked me, were they laid out for me?
Well, I was just wondering, so did you know going in about these secrets?
Okay.
Or were they even hidden from you?
Because I didn't, I knew about it just from doing my research. So once I watched what I could watch, and then I read, that's one thing I should have mentioned earlier, that when I'm doing research, I watch as much as I can, but they get to a point where there's only scripts available because they're either shooting or they haven't finished cutting it. So I do read all the scripts as well. And so I did know where it was all going. Yeah, you try to make those reveals as fun as possible. And I feel like even if you're a fan who's been figuring this all along, I think it's still satisfying to see the reveal and to be right. And so I hope that the fans all enjoy that.
Well, I know that I do. And, I'm not one that really gets into major predictions, but it's been really fun to hear what others have said. Well, I think it's going to be this. And I'm like, I just want to see how it's done. I just think it's so much fun. You're right, to see these reveals and how it happens.
Yeah, and one of my favorite ones to do was when Stamets is told by his unfortunately dead lover to wake up, and he opens his eyes, and for that brief moment you think that you're with Stamets, and then we reveal that it's Mirror Stamets in the that was a fun one to work out.
So is there anything that Hanelle tries to bring to a production that's her own distinct vision? Is there anything that you try and do that says this is Hanelle's work?
Well, what's so funny is that some people will look at my stuff and they would say that I can tell you did it. And I in a way, I don't even know. I don't even know what that is, because each time I try to just tell the story in the best way. And I guess there's something consistent to how I see the way of telling a story. I do know I have favorite things, like I love to have shots where something's really big in the foreground and there's something happening in the background. So like the shot with the sink dripping the water, those are shots that I like to do, and you probably will find at least one of them in everything that I do. But it's never like I set out to say, must find the place to put that shot, It has to it just has to make sense in the context of the storytelling. I love rack focuses, so you'll always see a bunch of those in my stuff. And I love shooting towards windows and shooting towards lights and getting flares and silhouettes and stuff. So those are probably all ways to tell that is a Hanelle episode.
Yeah, talking about what you're shooting, a lot, especially in sci-fi, we now have CGI scenes. So how much input do you have on editing or, making those decisions, like exterior shots of the ships and how the camera goes by? Or talk to us about working with CGI.
Sure. Star Trek was by far the biggest CGI project I've ever done, because I've done lots of green screen, but I have never done one where it was completely green screen. And they had this amazing system there of virtual reality, so that as the sets are designed, I could put on the virtual reality glasses and actually walk around the set to design my shot.
Oh, wow.
And so
That's cool.
So in that, I could say, hey, I can tell now that this window, can it be a little higher, or can it be here, or can we put something in this space, or can we flip the table the other way? Things like that were super helpful. And then even they have a storyboard artist who works with you from day one. So the opening scene, that is me telling the storyboard artist that I would love to start on the Terran logo and pull out, and then see that we're on the shuttle. And then as it goes further away, I want to see the ship behind them. So you're kind of designing all of that stuff. And I have to say, based on what I just told you earlier about when you shoot TV and you really don't know what you're going to get until you see it, I was wondering how much of that would actually stay. And generally, most of it stayed. I have one shot that I designed, which is once they are finally getting to the Charon, where the camera was going to slide out of the shuttle. Well, first they turned to the sun, and I had a shot behind their heads where you see what you think is the sun, and as the camera slides out of the shuttle, it reveals that it's actually the orb of that giant ship. And they ended up not doing it that way, and they cut that basically, and went to later, as you saw the little shuttle, and it lands in this gigantic fortress of a ship. So you have a lot of say in it. Definitely, there's a lot of stuff that had already been designed, like the actual Quran had already been designed, but things kept changing as they figured out other things that were going to happen, not only in my episode, but in future episodes that may have dictated that things change or color schemes change and stuff like that. But it was fun how much influence you do have in that process.
So you have the distinction of directing what many fans seem to be the grossest of all of Star Trek, where Burnham and Giorgio are eating Kelpien. So do tell us, what was the Ganglia made of that they ate? Give us the inside scoop.
If only you guys knew all the issues that went into that simple moment of her eating the Ganglia. I mean, for a while, it was going to be a VFX shot. For the actual look of the Ganglia changed so much. So what she ended up eating was, I think it was made, Sonequa is either vegan or vegetarian. So
Right.
it's kind of made out of a vegetarian gelatinous kind of stuff. So probably as if she was eating, I don't want to say Jell-O because it was a bit firmer than Jell-O, but that's what it was, total food grade, total tasteless stuff. And believe me, when we were shooting it, following Sonequa, I was like, I think only 2 more bites. I promise you, 2 more times you have to eat this stuff. But yeah, I end up with these distinctive moments in my episodes. I ended up shooting an episode of Empire, which is forever known as the episode where there was a 3-way sex scene between 2 living people and a ghost. So, I get interesting stuff.
Oh my gosh, I totally love that episode. Yeah, that is weird.
Did you see any of the social media on that? People were creating these images and memes, and somebody had done a picture of Hamburger Helper, and they replaced the glove with Saru's face, and they changed it to be called Kelpien Helper.
No, I did not see that, but I am going to look for that. I unfortunately was working. I'm typing in Kelpien Helper right now. I was shooting something when it aired, and I've been like nonstop since that day. So I usually try to find as much social media as I can, and I haven't been able to do as much with Star Trek unless they happen to tag me, and so I got a notification. But I'm going to look for that. That is hysterical.
I made one too where I found a shocked image of Saru's face, and I said, "Soylent Green is Kelpien."
That's great. Yeah.
Excellent, right on.
But yeah, there were tons and tons and tons of memos and discussions and meetings about this Kelpien, and seeing various designs and what color should a Kelpien be, and should how the suit that it was in. And I'm the one who asked, can she please serve it with chopsticks, so you could better see it. But then people were like, well, is that, could that be offensive to Asian people? But, I said, Michelle and I had a meeting before it, and she was like, oh, and that Kelpien scene, and I'm going to serve with chopsticks, right? And I was like, yes, exactly. How you want to do it.
I totally thought it was a piece of squid or something like that is what I thought it was.
Yeah, so they used them for the Klingon meal in one of the early episodes where you saw the Klingons eating, and they kind of had that gross plate of food.
Okay.
They used squid in that, and so they didn't want to repeat it.
Oh. Yeah, so we have some listeners who are interested. And so talking about that Kelpien scene, was that the most challenging scene, or for you or for the actors? Rebecca Skipper would like to know what's the most challenging scene in Vaulting Ambition.
Definitely the most challenging scene were the scenes with Anthony playing against himself. Challenging for production, technically, like I said, using the techno dolly. We had to, I ended up having rehearsals with Anthony, and his Danny is his double. And so thankfully the production allowed us to have, hours of rehearsal, really trying to work this all out, calling us the DP. So he and I working out what would be a techno dolly, what would be something else. You have Orphan Black that's like done those kind of scenes to, A+ level, but they had a lot more time to shoot them. So we had to bring out A game, but we still had to make it all work within our schedule. And then even working out the order of the shots per day, because you couldn't move the techno dolly, but you need him to change, but it takes time to change them. So what would make the most sense? So, and then for Anthony, just acting off of himself, every time we did a blocking, we would do it at least 2 times, but basically we would do it a few times with him in one role. And then before we committed to that, we would then need to do it again with him in the other role, so that Danny could see how he would do it, because ultimately you want his double to act as he would act, not make Anthony be locked into decisions that the double makes. Mm-hmm. So I think that was the hardest for Anthony. And believe me, we left that with so much respect for the shows that have done this. Mm-hmm. My goodness. I think of Orphan Black, and she's playing 5 characters, or more or less in scenes. The Kelpien dinner scene actually was not that hard to do. What was just generally interesting for Michelle, and she and I had, a few conversations, over drinks about it, was just the things that she would bring to that character to make her distinct from captain on the back the regular one versus the Terran version of her character, and which was something that also Anthony and I had to talk about too. What could be the little things that will make them different, and yet to bring in the fact that they've been raised in a completely different life. But then what are the things that are the same? And it kind of just raises this whole interesting kind of thought of what makes a person who they are and how much of it is nature versus nurture.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we just want to give acknowledgement here to Tim Cooper. It was his question about the length of the episode and asking what was cut out, but we did address that earlier in the interview, so thank you, Tim, for that. Ben Greet has a kind of a two-part question here for you. He says, how has your personal experience as a woman of color impacted your directing career and style, and what advice would you give any aspiring women directors?
Oh, okay. How my experience as a Black woman, how it affects my directing style, that's another one of those questions that I can't really answer, because I don't feel like I approach any scene consciously thinking, well, as a Black woman, I just approach them as a director trying to tell the story, and then whatever influence my background has, it's probably all in the subconscious and instinctive choices that I'm making. I do know that I pay attention to things like if something feels inauthentic to something a certain character would do, then I'll bring that up to the writers. And when we are casting, I try to, generally all the shows I've been on are now really good about letting casting just be open. But I always try to make sure, hey, are there places where we can really specify that this is a person of color, whether they be Black, Latino, Asian, or whatever, to try to bring that in. When I do my extras background, unless it specifically doesn't make sense, I always try to mix it up with ethnicities and also ages too, because a lot of times you end up with younger people, and I try to bring in older people as well. Mm-hmm. So I would more say that it just comes into par with certain choices as far as making sure that in my world, the TV world that I present, that is showing diversity and that is showing people of color doing, various things, and sometimes even, not showing people of color doing a certain thing. I may say I feel like I want this character to be white because we see, a Black person do that all the time, things like that. And then as far as advice for women, I would say that though you should be aware of the statistics about women directing, you just don't let that deter you, and don't let that bring you down. I just say, okay, I know it's bad, I'm just going to be the exception. That was kind of how I pursued it, and keep directing, keep making your shorts or whatever you're doing, keep having that experience, keep creating opportunities for yourself, so that once you do get the chance to pay, once you're in that lucky position where that time and opportunity and luck just cross, that you bring in a third ingredient, which is prepared, so that you can embrace it and knock it out of the park, so that you can get more opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you're aware, but you're the first African-American woman to direct for Star Trek.
Oh, no, I did not. I did not know that.
Yeah, so you've got that distinction.
For all the series?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So that's very important.
Yeah, that is.
You've made your mark.
All right. Well, I hope that yeah. Wow. That's kind of cool to know. Kind of sad to know, actually, all these years and all thousands of episodes. But so hopefully more will come after me.
Yeah, there also haven't been very many women who have directed as well, but they are trying to. There's a lot of attempt to try and bring equality to the behind the camera as well as in front of the camera. So I'm sure we'll see more in the near future. Yeah. Yeah, and it's definitely getting better. I can't tell you
it was so hard for me to get my first one, and then after you get my first one, so hard to get my second one, and similar for other women in my position at that time. But in the past year and a half, I've been seeing other women who were talented, who were aspiring like me, finally get their first opportunity, and then their second opportunity comes quicker. And so many more of them are going through these programs and actually coming out getting a job. So the industry is trying to change these statistics, and it is definitely easier, though, it is still extremely hard.
Well, I was wondering if there's any memorable stories that you can tell us, either from directing Star Trek or any of the other productions that might be funny or you'd like to share with us.
Yeah, I honestly try to think of of something, and I kind of came up blank because either they will start to feel gossipy and I don't want it out there, me telling the story, or if it was sort of so insular that I don't think if you're not there, it's not good. But, it's a good question, and it got me thinking that I really do need to, at the end of each production, I need to sit there and think of what would be the anecdote to share.
Right.
For next time I have an interview like this.
Well, for season 2, for the episode you do for season 2, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about? Like any other things that you work on besides film that you'd like the listeners to know about, or just an open forum for you to talk about anything you'd like to right now?
Okay. Well, let's see. Right now I'm in Vancouver and getting ready to start shooting The Flash tomorrow. So I guess that'll be up in 4 weeks. I'm finishing up my episode of SWAT with the editor. So that I think airs in March. There's a lot of preemption happening because of the Olympics. And then other than that, I'm trying to get features going. So if there are any people, any financier types out there who love my work and would love to help me bring a feature to life, they can feel free to contact me.
There you go. Well, you sound so busy. What do you do in your off time? What are your hobbies, or what relaxes you? What do you enjoy?
Well, I also have 2 kids, a 2-year-old and a 9-year-old. So on my off time, part of me is trying to make up for being the terrible absentee mom that I am when I'm shooting, especially when I'm out of town. But I love hikes, and I actually really do love watching TV. So I will binge watch some of the other shows. Love going to the movies. I enjoy going to plays. I enjoy going to museums. And I always feel like those are also enriching me as a filmmaker as well, to be able to do those things. I also love to read, but I have to say I haven't read a book in about 5 years, so that's pretty depressing. But,
I hear you on that.
But I have to do that.
Well, where can people find you on social media if they'd like to follow you or get information on your works?
So they can find me on Facebook. It's Hanelle Culpepper, writer-director is my page. And they can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Hillview798. And my website is hillview798.com, which will link to all that stuff. And that's it. I don't do Instagram. I had to draw a line somewhere with social media because it's just so overwhelming, you know. But I'm also on LinkedIn if anyone wants to try to find me there.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a real privilege to speak with you, and it's been great to get some behind-the-scenes information for your episode of Star Trek Discovery and your other works. Thank you so very much.
Oh, my pleasure, and thank you again for having me. I'm so excited to talk to the fans and to share some stories, and knowing that I'm the first Black woman to direct a Star Trek, and I think it's really cool then that you guys included me on your show.
Well, that was an absolutely outstanding interview, don't you think, Amy?
Absolutely. And thank you, listeners, for all those questions. It was really fun and so interesting.
Yeah, it's always a joy, and it's kind of giddy to be able to talk with one of the celebrities that works on our favorite shows, and to get that little bit of behind the scenes information into how they do what they do, into how they bring this television show to our screens and what we get to see. So it's really cool. And yeah, thank you very much for your questions. There were some great questions there. We did our best to get to all of them. I hope we grabbed all of them off of the Babel conference. But in case we didn't ignore you. There was just a lot there to go through. Well, speaking with Hanelle M. Culpepper is not the only thing we've been doing this week here on the network. So take a quick listen to this clip and see what else you may have missed elsewhere on Trek FM.
Previously on Trek.fm, Literary Treks.
But let's start with that first one, that Siege in Superspace. So, oh boy. Superspace, I don't know, is this better than subspace? Is it...
Well, I think it is. The thing I really love about this issue is we haven't had many stories at all about superspace.
The Edge, a Star Trek Discovery podcast.
Right, so okay, they're under orders they're not supposed to talk about, and that's how you maintain the continuity that Kirk and Spock are surprised that there's a mirror universe. I mean, that works. That makes sense. But these people were there. They know that there's doppelgangers there because they know that because Cadet Tilly became Captain Killy, right? They know this.
To the journey!
There was a lot of face melting in this episode. You're right.
Everyone's melting. What a world! What a world! It was, and everybody was slimy looking. Why were they so sweaty? Why?
7 of 9 had this full-on Borg Queen look about her.
She did, and who else was really sweaty looking? Besides 7.
Neelix was really sweaty looking. I thought
he was.
And he had kind of a silver tone. He had the silver
he
blood.
He did. He was distinguished. Distinguished melting Neelix.
Yes. Yeah, he got a buff and polish.
The 602 Club.
No, I mean, it was really all we had was animated shows. You had the animated Batman series, the animated Superman series, and as far as the big screen went, it was not so great. I mean, you had Blade. Blade was... Some people cite Blade as kind of the precursor for the superhero genre picking back up, but it was very much kind of a genre film. I know technically it is a comic book film. I don't know if I'd count it in the realm of big budget superhero movies.
And that's what else is happening on Trek.fm.
Check out all of these shows and join the conversation about your favorite corner of the Star Trek universe and beyond. You'll find us wherever you get your podcasts. That's, if you're an Apple user, be sure to hit the subscribe button in the Apple Podcasts on iPhone, iPad, or Apple TV, or the desktop iTunes app to get the latest episodes as soon as they are published. And please leave us a star rating and written review. That helps other listeners to find our shows. If you're not an Apple user, we've got you covered as well. You can find our shows on Google Play Music, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spreaker, SoundCloud, Windows Phone, in most third-party apps, and you can stream and download the MP3 file from our website or grab the RSS link.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show, and there are many ways for you to do that. The best places to join in the larger conversation is the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field, and it should come right up. If you'd like to send us an email, you can use the form on our website at trek.fm/contact, choose to send to a show, and select The Edge. That will come right to us. You can also find the network on Twitter at TrekFM and on Facebook at facebook.com/TrekFM. Amy, where can people find you when you're not speaking to the local celebrities who've directed your favorite episodes of the new Star Trek Discovery show?
Well, you can find me here on the network. I do a little show called Postcards from the Edge, and that drops on Thursdays. That's the fan response to each episode of Discovery. You can also find me on Earl Grey. That's Trek FM's dedicated podcast to the next generation, where I host with Justin Ozer and Richard Marquez. You can find me on Twitter at Miss Amy Nelson. But my favorite place is on the Babel Conference. And Brandon, where can people talk to you when you aren't getting these awesome interviews for us?
You can find me on Twitter at Brandon-Mutala. You can find me here on the network with new episodes of Warp 5 with my friends Brandy and Patrick, where we talk about Star Trek Enterprise. And you can find me over on the Fandom Podcast Network with a show called Good Evening, an Alfred Hitchcock podcast with my friends Chris and Tom as we go through the Alfred Hitchcock films one at a time. And you can find me in the Babel Conference every once in a while.
Well, if you'd like to help us keep all of our shows coming to you each week, you can become a patron of the network on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/TrekFM. That's patreon.com/TrekFM to get all the details. There's a lot of perks, and Brandon has made sure that you get them all. They include early access to episodes, exclusive content, producer credits, and more. And that's through our patrons' website, Patron Zone. It requires a great deal of money to produce and distribute these shows each month, and we really appreciate any support you can give us and hope that you will join the team. Again, you will find all the details at patreon.com/TrekFM.
And at this time, we'd like to thank the wonderful supporters of Trek FM and The Edge in specific. We've got the wonderful supporters of Norman C. Lau, Tony Robinson, Thomas Puleo, Lisa Slack, Shoab Mirza, Richard Rutledge, James Muldrow, and Cornelia Reutner. We greatly appreciate your support, and we couldn't do it without you. Well, I think that's all we got for you tonight. What do you think, Amy? Is that it?
That does it for us, yeah.
Okay.
Until
We'll tune in next time. Yeah, tune in next time and find out what we've been doing on the edge of Federation space.